5 days until Ohio State, Michigan. Tim May, the 40-year vet, Andy Backstrom, Spencer Holbrook here. We're going to talk about it. It's the Monday before Ohio State, Michigan. If you care about Ohio State 37, Minnesota 3, go watch the rapid reaction from after the game on Saturday night. We're here to talk about the game, maybe a little bit of Minnesota talk, how it relates to the game. But, fellas, there's nothing more important than 5 days from now, so we're not going to waste any more time talking about the Minnesota game.
Yeah. Boy, Minnesota, man, they came out. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're exactly right. Ohio State versus Michigan, undefeated versus undefeated, 2 versus 3. The last Big Ten East championship on the line for the chance to play in the Big Ten championship game. Obviously, the college football playoff ramifications. I'm not sure how it gets any bigger than that, except take it away, Anders.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that this game is going to be determining who goes to the college football playoff. I don't see at the moment a scenario where the loser still makes it in. Now, we said that last year too, and everything that happened that needed to happen for Ohio State
Dominoes
did happen.
fell.
So you never really know, but this does feel like, yeah, whoever wins absolutely wins the Big Ten East, goes to the Big Ten Championship, which Ohio State has not been in since 2020. They want to have another banner up in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. That's their first trophy they want. So this game is absolutely critical, and I feel like we can kind of go through in this show some of the weaknesses, some of the strengths Ohio State's kind of built, over the season, because we need to kind of do like a status check of where they're at after 11 games.
It's pretty crazy that this rivalry has gotten to this point where, 2006 was the first ever. It was amazing. It was the greatest game ever. 1 versus 2.
Game of the century.
Game of the century. 1 versus 2. We'll never see anything like it again, except for 3 times since 2016. 2 versus 3 in 2016. 2 versus 3 in 2022. 2 versus 3 in 2023. Fellas, I get the 10-year war. I get the 90s when Ohio State was trying to get over the hump. This is like the golden age of the rivalry. Both teams are at just an absolute peak. And to get 3 2 versus 3 matchups in the span of 7 years, when this rivalry's been going on for over 100 years, Tim,
No.
you can't get any better than what we've gotten. And I know Ohio State fans, maybe you don't care about that because it's the last 2 you've lost, but like this is the golden era of the rivalry.
Yeah, this is the absolute. I mean, that's why I keep telling everybody about the golden era of Ohio State offense, And,
Yeah.
of course, it kind of fell off a little bit this year, but not really super huge. But yeah, it doesn't get any better than this. And it has never been better than this in the past. I mean, it has been as good as this.
Mm-hmm.
But, you look back to the 10-10 tie in 1973, it was 50 years ago. 2 undefeateds going at each other. Boy, it was a lot on the line then because there wasn't a college football playoff. There was no Big Ten championship game. Ohio State versus Michigan was the Big Ten championship game. That's why the 10-year war was such a huge deal. And then, of course, Michigan should have taken a hint even way back then because it was a 10-10 tie. They came back and tied it in the second half in Ann Arbor. And then it came down to a vote of the athletic directors of the schools of the Big Ten on who should get to go to the Rose Bowl. And Michigan lost the vote,
Mm-hmm.
Just like right now, I think Michigan would lose a lot of votes based on what's been going on at Michigan the last 4 weeks, but carried back for like 2 years now, 2.5, 3 years now. So this game was already big enough, and then you throw in the Connor Stallions situation and the Chris Partridge situation getting fired, their linebacker coach, for we're not still sure exactly what, but something to do with the Connor Stallions thing. It's just the intrigue off the field is compelling. So this likely will be the highest watched or the most watched regular season game of 2023 in college football from a television standpoint. Because
Maybe ever.
Yeah, but it's crazy what's going on and still what the game means.
Yeah, and Andy, it's kind of bizarre that 2006 was an even year, so it was in this building. 2022 was in this building. 2016 was in this building. This is the first top 4 clash in this set of 4 that's up in the Stallion stable in Ann Arbor. So I don't know, does that change the way you feel about this game being on the road? Like, I guess we're going to dive right into it. What are your thoughts? We'll start with the atmosphere and then go to the team. What are your thoughts on how Ohio State's going to handle this?
I mean, this is a road-tested team. They've played 5 games already on the road. They opened the season on the road. They've played at Notre Dame. They've played at Wisconsin. If you have an Ohio State team, this is the one that's built to do this. I mean, normally you're Ohio State playing 7, 8 home games a year. They only played 6 this year. I think that's a strength for this team. I really think this schedule has proved fruitful for this Ohio State team to be tested on the road as much as they have. To now go into this game, they like playing on the road. The players have talked about that villain atmosphere, wanting to embrace that. I think that this is actually, in some ways, an advantage. You can't really get caught sleeping on the road. Okay, so I think that I actually like them being on the road if you're an Ohio State fan. I mean, that's something that, you'd obviously want to have them in the shoe, but if you can't, you'd want a team like this that's already been on the road and prove they can do it.
Yeah, you have no choice. You got to play the game on the road. I think this team has proven itself, as Jim Knowles reminded me on Saturday night when I asked him about this thing, that they have the main thing that stands out about this game is this is good versus good. I mean, this is like versus like. Just like Ohio State at Notre Dame, just like Ohio State versus Penn State. Ohio State passed those two tests. Michigan has had only one of those tests this year, the Penn State game, which they kind of beat Penn State pretty much the same way Ohio State did from a different standpoint. I mean, it is what it is at this point. This is where you got to go. The road to Indianapolis goes through Michigan for Ohio State.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of a detour there, Tim. Yeah. Up 23. And
then you go down 69, and there you are.
Up to Ann Arbor.
No, I'm talking about back to Indianapolis.
Yeah, I think the Ohio State road advantage, Andy, is a point well taken, or a point well given. I'll make it a point well taken. I like that idea because the Buckeyes really did embrace that road atmosphere at Notre Dame. They kind of fed off the energy. They knew that it was going to be, for the defense, which is the strength of this team still, it's quiet when you're on the road. Like, you get to communicate better. When you're in the horseshoe, like, I'll be honest, like, sometimes these guys talk about it. When they're in the horseshoe and it's a big game and they're on defense, it kind of sucks for them because they're feeding off the crowd, yes, but they can't communicate to save a life. You go up there to Ann Arbor, the crowd, it's not I don't want to call it a smart crowd. I'm not going to give the Big House that kind of credit. But the crowd hushes when Michigan's on offense. That helps Ohio State's defense communicate. Obviously, the offense is going to have its share of communication issues, but I'm sure they've already been planning for different means of communication considering what's been going on in Ann Arbor. So I like it. I think that they can embrace this road warriors. Ryan Day has said those exact words a few different times this year, the road warriors. And that's going to be a big factor in this. But if Ohio State can embrace it, there's a certain villain mentality that you can carry up there. I remember in 2019, one of my favorite Buckeyes to cover, but obviously didn't have a great pro career, Damon Arnett coming up the tunnel after the game. All the recruits from Michigan are walking up the tunnel and it's really quiet, and then all of a sudden you just see Damon Arnett coming through and he's yelling, "Michigan recruits, don't come here, you're not going to win this game." And like, they really in 2019 embraced that. They climbed up on the wall after the game and sat with the Ohio State fans down on the field in the Big House. They were agging the crowd on in the fourth quarter when they were picking passes off and scoring more touchdowns and J.K. Dobbins going around the end. Like, that's the mark of a championship team, when you go on the road and you just embrace that. And like you said, Andy, I've seen this team do that. They got to storm the field as a team against Notre Dame. Maybe they'll get to do it again on Saturday.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that this defense travels, and we know that. And I think Tim even wrote in his story for LettermenRow.com, what a team is after 11 games. Yeah. The proof is in the pudding, and I think with this defense, we know that it can travel. We know it's going to show up, and I think when you're looking to build a championship team, that's a great thing to have. And so when you're going to Ann Arbor, I don't think any of us are worried about this defense showing up. I think we're all just a little bit, not concerned, but wondering what kind of offense will show up for Ohio State. The offense of the last couple of weeks that's beat up on admittedly bad teams, but has looked better and more of an identity, or the offense that at times has been clunky and head-scratching this season.
Yeah, and this is what's funny, man. I think, I don't know, maybe other beats do the same thing at Alabama and Georgia. I know everybody was down on Alabama at the beginning of the year about its offense because it should have been. I mean, until they figured out what to do with Jalen Milroe, and especially after the South Florida near disaster, they finally got their act together. But, I just, when I was driving home on Saturday night after we recorded our thing here, it just dawned on me again, Ohio State just beat a Big Ten team that's got some problems, Minnesota. They just beat them 37-3. Not 7-3. I wasn't gonna go through all the sevens there. Not 7-3, but 37-3. Pretty much owned the game from the get-go.
Yeah.
The previous week, I mean, I sometimes I don't think you sit back and really appreciate what you've what you're witnessing, because these are like heavyweight fights. Even when the opponent is not up to your standard, he's still a heavyweight. You know, he can still throw punches. And I was impressed the more I thought about it, about the way Ohio State beat Minnesota on Saturday, because they just kind of like just thoroughly just kind of owned the game. Could have been better on offense in the first half, without a doubt, you know, but they still just owned the game from the outset. And the thing it's really asking a lot for you to just come in and just dominate people from the very beginning of a game in any kind of situation. And for us to hold that over a team's head, you always got to look at it finally on how did the thing turn out. I know I've said that a bunch of times on this show, but I'm impressed by how thoroughly Ohio State has beaten most everybody on its schedule this year, with maybe the exception of Notre Dame, and they should have done it that night, if you follow me. I mean, they should have had a much bigger lead. They were up 10-0 and then blew the lead. My point is, like you were talking about, this team is ready to go to war because they have a defense they feel really good about. But the biggest test is coming Saturday.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we've talked about it all year. Like, would you rather win a game 59-24 and win by 35, or would you rather win a game 37-3 and win by 34?
Yeah.
So, like, you're still getting the same result. Ohio State, you know, I know there are people who don't like gambling, and that's fine, but it does tell the story of the season. Ohio State's 7-3-1 against the spread this year. Like, they're beating teams the way that experts who do this for a living and know exactly where they should be beating teams, they're beating teams by more than that.
Yeah.
And so that tells you, you know, it's a little different. It doesn't look like 51 points here and 49 points here and 61 points here, but it's 38, it's 35, it's 34. And you know what? The defense is holding teams under 10, under 15, under, 16 and 17 are the two highest outputs this year by the defense. So, and I will also give credit to two quick things. I'll give credit to Ohio State for scoring 37 despite having putrid field position the entire first half.
Yeah.
I mean, you get into a field position battle with Minnesota.
Didn't make a big enough deal about that. Yeah.
It's a losing battle with Minnesota to get into a field position war. And the Buckeyes ended up coming out on top and scoring 37 despite having bad field position and despite putting the defense near the 50 just about the entire first half.
Yeah.
Minnesota had great field position the entire first half and didn't get past the 40 until the fourth quarter. So I was really impressed. The thing I was most impressed about, and I'll throw it over to Andy for this, I said on 97.1 The Fan this morning, Morning Juice, I appreciate those guys for having me on for such a big week, that this was the most professional.
Is that an endorsement?
Yeah, I mean, they help us. They help Lettermen Row. We help them by coming on, talking about the Buckeyes.
Gotcha.
This was the most professional and mature win of the season for Ohio State. They had every reason to come out and the defense kind of let up a little bit, just look forward to next week. They had every reason to just get in and get out with a win, and instead they physically dominated Minnesota. The defense was imposing. The offense got on quick, had a few struggles there in the middle, but moved the ball throughout the game. Like, you want to talk about a mature team that knows how to take care of business before a big game? I thought this was the most mature they've looked all year because they didn't even start celebrating until the second half. They knew that work still needed to be done. They're taking it one day at a time, and that starts up top. Ryan Day's doing a good job of that, but the players are really driving that one day at a time, staying focused, and now that we're here, they can finally get on to focusing on Michigan.
As Ryan Day said, the game was still in the balance at the end of the first half. Now, I think we all expected Ohio State to pull away and win, but they hadn't yet. He said they wanted to win the first 5 minutes of the second half. They won the first minute, and that the rest didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And so I think that's super key, though. We think about the Michigan game last year, right? Close at halftime. Ohio State has the lead. Then in the second half, what happens? Everything unravels. This team this year, though, has been stronger in the second half than it's been in any other part of the game this season. And I think that's important to note because we all know how last year went in the back half, the third and fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And I think that when you get a team that consistently has won those first 5 minutes of the second half, that makes you a lot more confident going into a game like this because even if they're down at halftime, they're not out.
Yeah. And I got from the guys we talked to, the few guys we got to talk to on Saturday, including Ryan Day, I didn't get the indication there was a fire and brimstone speech given at halftime by anybody. I'm sure there was some yelling and stuff. But the first play right out of the gate, Travion Henderson goes 75. The first play right out of the gate for Minnesota, Jack Sawyer strips the ball. JT Tuimoloau recovers, scoops, and runs, and they score a touchdown. What? Was that the next play? I'm trying to remember.
2 plays after.
2 plays after that. That was crazy. That was really crazy. And it was like you just said, it's like they came to a realization, and maybe they didn't. Maybe things just opened up. They just came to a realization. this will not stand, you know. Yeah. And boom, the game was, because there was no way Minnesota, except for miracles, was going to score 2 touchdowns, you know, and get back into that game. And of course they didn't. And that was really, that stood out for me. Meanwhile, the other team was playing at Maryland, and without a scoop and score for a touchdown, that game's dead even. And Maryland never quit on Michigan.
They also had 2 safeties, too.
Exactly. Maryland never quit on Michigan. One of them was very controversial. I still don't understand why they didn't get credit for throwing the ball away instead of grounding, but that's for the officials to deal with. But I'm not sure what kind of team they're running into this Saturday at Michigan, which will be without its head coach for the 3rd straight game. The Bloom, whatever robust jump they got from an emotional standpoint, they got at the Penn State game, in my opinion, from that. Now, what everybody's come to realization of is, well, he took the plea deal. I mean, as opposed to going in and fighting in front of Judge Judy and stuff, Jim Harbaugh in Michigan backed off. So there is stuff going on up there. Chris Partridge did get fired on last Friday, their linebackers coach. There's stuff going on there which can't be the best way to be going into a game like this with having some kind of doubts about what's going on around you as a football team. Do you follow me there?
Yeah.
What has been going on around you? People doubting you. Yeah, you can get fired up about that once or twice, but 3 times, that's going to be very interesting. I say all that, and this is a team that last year beat Illinois on the last play with a field goal, and you're going, wow, that's not the juggernaut I'm expecting.
Yeah.
They don't let their quarterback throw the ball down the field. I'm talking about J.J. McCarthy, blah, 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 blah. And we all saw what happened in the second half here last year. So to think we are seeing harbingers here of what's coming on Saturday, sometimes, well, most of the time, that is not the case in college football.
I like what you said a minute ago, Tim, and I'm not trying to just gloss over what you just said, but you said this will not stand as like the Ohio State defense in the second half, just Ohio State pouring it on. There's a little bit of that to the entire team overall, especially when it comes to Michigan. Do you remember, we were there, 2021. Were you up in Ann Arbor for 2021?
No.
Okay, 2021, but you got the sense, even watching through it, the 85-inch. I
don't know why I wasn't there, but I wasn't there.
The 85-inch screen you were watching on in your man cave, Tim. In 2021, it was almost like you could see it happening in real time. Michigan finally said, this and the rivalry will not stand.
Yeah.
And it's over. This streak is over. We're shattering this glass ceiling that's ahead of us, and we're getting through it. And Ohio State does that at times in just individual games right now this year with this defense. They just say, okay, we're done. Rutgers, you had some fun in the first half. We're done. We're done here. Maryland, we're good. You guys had your fun. We're good. There's an element to the rivalry in that, where this entire Ohio State team has heard everything since 2021, whether that's from Josh Gaddis, who's now at Maryland, whether that's from Jim Harbaugh himself, who won't be on the sideline, whether that's from players on social media, whether that's from fan bases, whether that's from national media questioning the stability of the program as it relates to against the best teams in the country, most notably the rival to the north. And there's going to come a point, and I think it's this week, where Ohio State is on the precipice of saying, enough, we're done, enough. We're taking this back. And so I think that's the mindset that they're going to carry into this week, Andy.
But what if Michigan has the same result?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously both teams want to win, so it's not something
you still gotta, like you said, you still got to make the plays.
Well,
I mean, that's the point.
Obviously, but I'm just, like, there's a mindset
That's what
thing.
stands out about this team defensively is when they've needed a play to take
Which is
over
what-
a game. It's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
When they needed a play to flip the script, they've gotten it defensively. And you can have an example in every game.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, Michigan has done that defensively too this season. And that's why I think we're seeing the 2 top scoring defenses in the country. We've been talking about that for weeks. That's why I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think it's going to come down to the end. I like defensive football, so I'm excited. But it's going to be one of those games where, you have to step up. You have to step up. You have to make the plays when it matters most, when your back is against the wall. And I think it's really going to come down to the quarterback play of who plays better. And I don't think we can analyze all we want from the last 11 games, but it really doesn't matter. It's who plays better at that quarterback position, who's turnover free, who makes the right throws at the right time, and maybe just doesn't try to be extraordinary, because you have the defense that allows you not to be. But as you mentioned, Tim, I mean, J.J. McCarthy didn't look great in that Illinois game. He didn't look great last week, but he looked probably the best he has, at least last season. It was his best game here in the Horseshoe. And so that's all that matters on Saturday is how you play then. We can do all the digging up the analytics, but
they turned him loose to throw the ball deep a few times here last year.
Yeah.
Guys were wide open when he threw it to them. The play that flipped the game, and I think y'all agree with me just from the standpoint of because Michigan it looked like it was about to get beat in this stadium until
Michigan was getting its ass kicked in this stadium for a quarter and a half.
That tackle out on the edge on that little hitch pass, and the guy goes the distance, and the next thing you know, the snowball never quit getting bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what you can't allow. Big plays just so much determine these kind of like otherwise kind of even Steven matches. It's nuts. We'll get into that as the week goes on and stuff. But here's the thing that stands out to me: the last 2 weeks, J.J. McCarthy looks like he's almost something's wrong with him. I mean, just from a physical standpoint. I mean, they literally took the ball out of his hands from a throwing situation at Penn State. In the second half because he didn't throw a pass, and then last week same thing. He didn't look sharp. I mean, their passing game did not look sharp against a team that Ohio State threw the ball against pretty well.
Ohio State, no, not Ohio State. J.J. McCarthy did roll that ankle against Penn State, and they didn't use him in the running game against Maryland. So, I'm not a doctor, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express, and I did watch the Penn State game where J.J. McCarthy did not look the same after the ankle was rolled.
I saw you with your stethoscope though when you walked in.
Yeah, the pulse of the program is that J.J. McCarthy is good, but he's not 100%. But guess what? It's November. Kyle McCord's not 100%. No. Marvin Harrison Jr. hasn't been 100% since the Notre Dame game. Emeka Egbuka is as close to 100% as he will be. But I even asked Travion Henderson walking up the tunnel after the game, Travion, you back at 100% yet? He's like, nah, but I'm good. I'm fine. Yeah. Because he'll never be at 100%. Nobody will at this time of year.
Right.
It's the healthiest that Ohio State's been heading into this game, I think, since 2019. They weren't very healthy in 2021. Yeah. Everybody had the flu, and that's not an excuse. It's just every college football team gets the flu. And in 2022, they weren't that healthy. That's, again, not an excuse at all. Michigan beat the tar out of them. But, this is probably the healthiest this team has been in a while heading into this game. And,
I agree.
I can't really say the same for Michigan right now because of the quarterback issue that he's got.
Yeah. Interestingly, the thing I was disappointed about with Ohio State, Minnesota was I thought there was going to be more of an effort to get Marvin Harrison Jr. the football in what everybody knew was his last game in the shoe. And that great video Ohio State posted of him turning back and looking back, as he was leaving the field, that was unbelievable. But I don't know. I sometimes you save things, right? But that game with the game plan reminded me of Ohio State's game plan against Indiana in the opener when Marvin Harrison Jr. was almost an afterthought. And I'm still not sure what I watched on Saturday in that regard, but maybe they were making sure he's as fresh as he can be going into Ann Arbor. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things, right? There's the Heisman campaign, and that doesn't ultimately matter that much for this team, but there is that. He doesn't really get to beef up that resume. But more importantly, he's the offense, basically. You know, when Marvin goes, this offense goes. And I think that's the big thing for this week is his targets need to be up 10, 12, 15 maybe, because it doesn't matter if he's bracketed. It doesn't matter if he's double covered. You really don't even care which defensive back is covering him this week for Michigan. You still got to get him the ball, whether that's in the short game, the medium game, or deep. You got to find ways to fit the ball into him, and I think that is just a big point of emphasis. So I think it's a point well taken to him because if they don't get him involved, I don't see a way they win this game.
I looked down on the bench a couple times when the defense was on the field, and everybody was trying to get under those warm benches, and he was kind of sitting on the edge all by himself with another 7 receivers all trying to sit in a space for 5 guys. He just looked sort of forlorn a little bit, almost like it wasn't so much he was disappointed. It was more like it looked like he was in deep thought about, man, this is my last home game. Yeah. Probably. Who knows, what the future is going to bring. But every time the big lights come on, he has shown up, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why you're kind of looking forward to Saturdays to see what they do with him. Temperature is going to be like what it is right now, which is not
cold.
Yeah, it's cold right now as we're standing here in Ohio Stadium. A little bit of a breeze, which enhances it. Feels like it. I think the temperature right now is 39. Feels like it's 10. But yeah, they can't let the weather take him out of the game. If you follow my draft on
Well,
Saturday.
I think the re-emergence of Emeka Egbuka changes things for Ohio State as well.
Absolutely.
Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be defended by Will Johnson. He's going to be bracketed by a safety, probably Rod Moore or another safety there. I don't want to get too in the weeds here. Emeka Egbuka is probably going to have to go up against Mike Sanders still, who's got like 9 pick sixes this year. The guy is a ball magnet.
Yeah.
He's a very good.
Had big plays here last year.
He's a very good nickel corner. If Jordan Hancock's not the best nickel in the Big Ten, then Mike Sanders still is. Like, those guys are very, very good. So this wide receiver versus secondary matchup is a really big one to watch. But guess what? Every time in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s career we've talked about wide receivers versus corners, there's only been one person that's been the winner. We didn't talk about it against Maryland. I think Deonte Banks and him kind of went head-to-head and did a good job. But look at the other guys. Joey Porter Jr., check one, Marvin. Kalen King, Marvin. Keely Ringo, by God, Marvin. It was not even close.
That cost Keely Ringo a lot of money.
Yeah, it certainly did, Tim. You're absolutely right, partner. But like these are the matchups that are going to decide this game. And I know every year since like Vietnam, the team that rushes for the most yards wins the game. But like the wide receivers for Ohio State, especially without rain, without snow, like the wide receivers for Ohio State against this Michigan secondary, you got to get open and you got to find a way to get Marvin the ball. I completely agree with you. But also, again, the team that wins the running battle wins the game. Blake Corum just had 24 carries for 98 yards. That's not a very good showing against a Maryland team that you shouldn't be able to run for a lot against. Travion Henderson didn't play against Maryland. I like to think he would have had a good day against Maryland because he's had a good day against everyone. And this rushing battle between Travion Henderson and Chip Trayanum and Xavier Johnson and even Marvin Harrison Jr. on the end arounds against the running battle of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, who hasn't looked that great this year for whatever reason, and the rushing attack from Michigan, that's where this game will be won, Andy.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned the health of Ohio State. They're healthy at running back, or at least more healthy than they've been than last year, and I think that's saying something because you have Travion Henderson, who looks close to 100% as possible, as you said. And then you got Chip Trayanum, who's back after having a little bit of hiccup with an injury at Purdue. And then you have Mine Williams, yes, he's out for the year. But then you have Dallin Hayden, who's available to play if he needs to play. We saw him against Minnesota. I thought that was noteworthy. And then you still have Xavier Johnson, who has proven to be a viable running back, wide receiver, do-it-all kind of player for this team. I think that's actually really diversified this rushing attack. And when they talk about offensive identity, Ryan Day was pretty careful in saying, like, it's not that we haven't had an identity as a team, but we didn't really have an offensive identity for a while. We were trying to forge it, and he's been adamant that the last 3 weeks, even at Rutgers, he felt like they took a significant step in building an offensive identity. I think a huge part of that offensive identity is balance.
Oh, absolutely.
And actually having a running game they can count on. And it's not just the home run hits that Travion Henderson's had, because he's had those. It's the 10-yard gains. The first drive of the game, they scored a touchdown, 8 plays. Travion Henderson touched the ball 5 times. There were 3 runs at 10 or more yards.
Yeah.
It's those runs, the 10 or more.
I think they gained first downs on 4 single plays. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least 4 single plays during that drive.
Picking
You're exactly
up
right.
chunks of yards, especially on the ground. And I think that's the balance. That's the identity. They can play off of that. It takes pressure off of Kyle McCord.
Cade Stover.
Exactly. And so I think that is the key to this game. Can they have balance? Because Chip Trayanum was the starting running back for all intents and purposes last year in this game. Now it's Travion Henderson. And that's no disrespect to Chip Trayanum. That's a big difference.
Yeah. Both of Travion Henderson's touchdown runs were incredible. The second one was amazing, the 75-yard run where he was just shot out of a cannon into the second level, past Julian Fleming's great block. And I'm telling you, the first touchdown run by him is one of the most impressive runs I've ever seen Travion Henderson have, because there was absolutely nothing there. There was a corner that was trying to get up there to make a play. There was a safety trying to fill a lane. There was a linebacker coming to the inside to fill a gap. And Travion Henderson put his foot in the ground, jump cuts to get the linebacker to hit the other linebacker and get to the next level and burst only 9 yards, but the burst there to get to the end zone. Wow. And we saw against Michigan all the way back in 2019, the last time this team beat Michigan, J.K. Dobbins was an absolute difference maker. He had 4 touchdown runs, and the Michigan front was pretty good, but J.K. Dobbins made jump cuts. He made a difference in that game. They got him to the edge, and he went to the second level and then got to the end zone. Travion Henderson has that ability.
Yeah.
And so he is going to be, I think he is the most important player in the entire game. It's not. I don't even think it's Blake Corum or J.J. McCarthy or Will Johnson for the Michigan side. I don't think it's Marvin Harrison Jr. or Kyle McCord or Jordan Hancock or Tyleek Williams. I think it's Travion Henderson because of the way that he changes everything for this offense.
He is nitroglycerin, because if you don't handle him correctly, he's going to go. He's going to go off. And that's exactly, I mean, boom, because we've seen him stoned at the line of scrimmage a few times. And then all of a sudden, but that burst is still there. Mm-hmm. And this is as close as we've seen him to 100% since his freshman year, in my opinion. Last year was just an anomaly. But there's no doubt what he brings to the table. But, just like Andy Anders was talking about a minute ago, you've got a tight end who's catching the ball and making plays. You've got your two best receivers on beam. Plus, Julian Fleming had some really good catches here to keep drives alive, et cetera, on Saturday. So that's 3 wide receivers, along, including Marvin Harrison Jr. And then you throw Travion Henderson in the backfield. And the other thing, now that I've seen the master plan come to fruition,
don't you mean
Dallin Hayden? The Dallin Hayden plan now makes total sense to me, because Dallin Hayden, I thought, ran well on Saturday. He has one game left in his one arrow left in his quiver to not blow his redshirt season. That's going to be coming up on Saturday, because you can't win the Big Ten championship game if you don't get there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if they can get past the Big Ten championship game, which is going to be against
Iowa.
Yeah, free-flowing Iowa. He can play. He can play in the college football playoff. Dallin Hayden can. It has nothing to do with the redshirt situation, which I made sure Ryan Day clarified that before he left the podium the other night, because that's interesting to me, man. Because this team really, when you look at it from midseason to now, is much more potent on offense with Travion Henderson on board, with Emeka Egbuka. Now, like you said, that little takeoff he had up the seam, basically a skinny post. He was flying, Now he got hit really hard at the end of it. But wow, does that change things for Michigan and its defensive coaches on how to scheme this game. But what it's always going to come down to, and it always does, is how well does your offensive line play. Michigan's offensive line, they've gotten the running game the last 2 weeks when they've had to have it, but there have been some question marks about it from a pass pro standpoint the last several weeks. I think Ohio State's line is coming on at the right time. Do y'all agree with me on that before we end this?
Yeah, I agree.
We'll talk about it more as the week goes on.
Yeah, we will. We're going to set the table all week before we
Except for that, whatever that was at the end of the first half when they tried to get Kyle McCord killed or whatever. I mean, that was crazy what happened to the offensive line at the end of the first half the other day against Minnesota. Agreed?
Yeah, I agree. And
there were free runners through there.
It can't happen against Michigan. And so they've got a lot to figure out. We're going to continue to add side dishes, set the table for Saturday before we eat at noon up in Ann Arbor. Andy Backstrom, are you going to Ann Arbor this Saturday?
I will be.
Okay. Tim May, you heading up there?
I'll be there on Friday.
40-year vet heading up to Ann Arbor on Friday. Spencer Holbrook, Lettermen Row crew in the horseshoe right now in the aftermath. But when we started the video, they still had Ohio State 37, Minnesota 3 up there. Now it says nothing.
Well, Mike Bassford walked in with his camera, took some kind of photo on the field, one of the sports information directors here, and left, and then the scoreboard lights went out.
I don't know.
Memories, baby. He was trying to get some memories.
I'm looking right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 national championships up there on the banners. Ohio State trying to add 2023 to that. They cannot do so if they don't beat Michigan on Saturday in Ann Arbor in the Big House. The Stallions stable itself. Tim May, the 40-year vet, he's heading up there. Andy Backstrom and myself, Spencer Holbrook. The Lettermen Row crew will be making its way up north. Maybe we'll just tag along right behind the team bus, Tim, since it's the only game they bus to anymore. A lot of coverage coming, LettermenRow.com. We've got Michigan opponent previews with some of the guys over at the Wolverine. We've got, I'm going to try to have Jake Butt from Michigan, former Michigan tight end on the show. He's going to talk about a charity and also a little bit of game action. Andy's going to have a lot of stuff, full team breakdowns, a lot of stuff to be thankful for this Thanksgiving season. Tim May, he's going to have a lot of coverage.
Yeah, I've got John U. Bacon and Paul Feinbaum and Matt Wilhelm on my podcast, the Tim May Show this week, and then I'm going to, of course, have Urban Meyer summing things up.
All that to say, a lot of coverage coming at LettermenRow.com. We're going to be in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Tuesday to talk to Ryan Day, the head honcho himself, about Ohio State versus Michigan, the game, the rivalry game. All the M's beginning to be crossed out in Columbus as we move forward. 5 days till Ann Arbor. 5 days until 2 versus 3, 11-0 versus 11-0. It's an epic clash. We can't wait to get there. We can't wait to provide the coverage. Go there right now. Get your first month for $1 or your first year 50% off right now at lettermenrow.com. Tim May, the 40-year vet. Andy Backstrom, Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys in the Woody tomorrow on Tuesday.